Hey, easy, easy.
Shortly after takeoff,
What's going on?
Whoa, whoa.
a 140-ton plane slams into the heart of Miami.
Crash at 72nd and 25th.
I saw the plane coming directly at me.
That was a fiery scene, very dramatic, and was traumatizing.
Investigators must figure out what caused the catastrophic crash.
We had a lot of fire damage. It hurts an investigation.
But their case hits a dead end.
What am I missing?
It became apparent that there was a little bit of covering up going on.
Until they get an anonymous tip
Who is this?
Take a look.
that could break the investigation wide open.
They didn't stand a chance.
August the 7th, 1997. Fine Air Cargo Flight 101 prepares to take off from Miami to the Dominican Republic.
Fine Air 101, cleared to Santo Domingo. Frequency will be 125.5, squawk 1407. Where are you parked?
Captain Patrick Thompson is a former Marine and a highly experienced pilot specializing in cargo flights.
Okay, 1407 on the squawk, and we're up in the northeast corner, thanks.
David Anizeski is an ex-Fine Air pilot who knows the captain well.
There were only 50 pilots. You know, this was your family as a small group. We flew together, we lived together, we ate together. The captain was a gentle soul, easy to get along with.
First Officer Steve Petrosky will be the pilot flying this leg.
He called me this morning about it.
Really?
Today's crew are replacing another crew delayed because of a maintenance issue. They know each other well.
John called me about 8:30 this morning. Hey, get up. You're flying at 12 o'clock.
Were you on standby?
I don't think so.
The third member of the crew is flight engineer Glenn Millington.
All good out there.
Okay, thank you.
He's just finished his walk-around, the check of the exterior of the DC-8. He still needs to check the cargo hold.
They still got the belly open?
Yeah, I'll go back and check out what's going on.
Fine Air is the largest cargo airline flying into and out of Miami, a hub that's rapidly expanding.
Miami-Dade and literally all the South Florida area. The 90s was a heyday. There was this big economic boom from trade with Latin America.
We flew to Santo Domingo a lot. I think we had 1.3 flights a day. That was one of our busier routes. A lot of textiles down, a lot of full product coming back.
Today's route to Santo Domingo is a 2-hour and 10-minute flight southeast over the Atlantic. In the cargo hold, Millington checks to see if the pallets holding the cargo are secure. Special locks hold the pallets in place during flight.
Looks like we're good to go.
The DC-8 is loaded with more than 87,000 pounds of denim.
And then I went to Salvador and I told them, they don't have air conditioning, I'm not getting on the plane.
Yeah. Howdy.
The cargo runs are such big business that security guard Enrique Soto is on the flight to watch over the freight. At 12:30 p.m., when Flight 101 taxis to its runway, First Officer Petrosky recites a familiar drill.
Okay, standard Fine Air procedure. If there's a problem prior to V1, which is 130 knots, the pilot in command will abort the airplane. We treat anything after V1 as an in-flight emergency.
Sounds good.
At 12:34, the tower makes contact.
Fine Air 101, fly heading 270, cleared for takeoff.
Clear takeoff 27 right. Fine Air 101 heavy.
Okay, 4 spooled and stable.
Max power.
Okay, coming up on 60 knots. Power set. 80. V1. Rotate.
The plane lifts off the runway.
Hey, easy, easy. Easy, easy, easy.
You're up.
The air traffic controller is alarmed by what he now sees.
What's going on?
Whoa, whoa.
The crew fights to get the plane under control.
What's happening? Oh no. No!
Where's your emergency? Yes, there's been a plane crash at 72nd and 25th. You need to roll everything because it's right dead across the street.
It's the unthinkable. A plane crash in the heart of Miami.
Stay away from the flames.
Many left the crash scene in a rush, leaving behind important belongings.
It was a fiery scene and very dramatic.
Everybody needs to move all the way back off the sidewalk.
Hundreds of people have witnessed the catastrophe.
I saw the plane coming directly at me.
The plane continued to try to go up, and it just fell on the ground, and it exploded.
When it crossed one of the freeways, by chance, the traffic lights were red. And so it managed to cross the freeway with not a huge amount of loss of life that it would have if the traffic lights were green. It was almost an eerie coincidence. It could have been a lot worse, and I was relieved that it wasn't worse in terms of loss of life that it was.
The plane's 3-man crew and security guard are confirmed dead. Another victim is discovered after his parked car was demolished in the crash. Only hours later, the NTSB in Washington rushes their GO team to Miami. Former Air Force pilot Bob Benson is the lead NTSB investigator. Benson's a legend in the field for his doggedness.
All right. Okay, we're gonna start over here. You ask your guys not to move anything? Great, thanks.
I personally had just gotten back from a major accident in Newark, and I got launched to Miami for the Fine Air event. So at least for me, it was a very busy time.
More than 48,000 pounds of jet fuel has turned the plane into a mass of smoking debris.
There weren't a lot of large parts left. The engines were recognizable, pieces of the tail perhaps, but the rest of it was a burned up mess.
If we swing around here, we can see that there are already investigators in the field inspecting parts of the plane that crashed first into this field, and then the rest of the plane that seems to have skidded right across Northwest 72nd Avenue.
Bob Benson is eager to get data from the plane's black box recorders.
Well, you caught them both. Good work.
We recovered the flight data recorders rather rapidly once we got into the accident scene.
The 2 recorders are sent to Washington for analysis. In the meantime, Benson is under pressure to figure out what happened. The city of Miami narrowly avoids an unparalleled airplane disaster. NTSB investigators start collecting eyewitness accounts.
There was a fireball on one of the engines on the right wing. As soon as that fireball erupted, he lost it and just went belly down.
A couple of the witnesses mentioned seeing flames coming from the number 4 engine on the right side.
Benson wonders if the plane suffered catastrophic engine failure, which prevented it from getting airborne. They search for a telltale clue that the engines were working. Turbine blades bent sideways suggest they were still spinning rapidly when a plane hits the ground.
We looked inside them, and it looked like they were all operating at high power settings, just from visual examination.
They were definitely spinning.
Investigators rule out engine failure, but quickly get new information from the plane's air traffic controller.
Just after takeoff, he went steeply nose up. I could see the tops of the wings.
The discovery explains the flames witnesses saw. If a plane is pitched too steeply, airflow to the engine is interrupted, causing too much fuel to flow through the engines.
It's simply an airflow issue. There wasn't enough air getting into the engines, and you get a lot of extra fuel that's on fire, and it's going out the back of the engine.
I could see the
NTSB investigator Evan Byrne now wonders why the plane's nose rose up so suddenly.
What this told us early in the investigation was that we either had a problem with the airplane, something that the pilots did during the takeoff, or there may have been something wrong with the load.
Meanwhile, Benson discovers what might be a new piece of evidence.
This aircraft, partially because it's so long, is equipped with a tail bumper. We saw some scraping, some paint residue on it, which means that sometime during its life, it had touched the ground somehow.
If a pilot lifts up too steeply, the tail can rub against the runway. It's called a tail strike.
You can have a tail strike if you rotate too rapidly or if you rotate too early before you have enough speed.
Then investigators discover that the runway used by Flight 101 has white paint down its middle, similar to the white paint found on the plane's tail bumper. Did the Fine Air pilots simply lift their plane too steeply, scraping the runway? They decide to collect paint samples from both the tail bumper and the runway.
It was important for us to determine whether or not the tail struck the runway, so we asked the Dade County Sheriff's Department in their laboratory to look at the paint sample, try to compare it with the center line of the runway.
If the paint is a match, it would suggest the pilots botched the takeoff by lifting the nose at a dangerously steep angle. In the meantime, the investigators' search for more clues is stymied by the fact that the entire cargo hold was consumed by fire.
When you have a lot of fire damage, it hurts an investigation. You'd rather have pristine parts to look at, things that aren't melted and then stuck together.
But then, Benson makes a shocking discovery.
Got something. This bear claw's unlocked.
We found a lot of these bear claws or cargo locks open.
So they wouldn't have been restraining cargo.
Every pallet in the hold is supposed to be locked before takeoff to prevent cargo from shifting. Soon, Benson finds more that are unlocked.
We found 60 bear claws and like 57 or so were actually open. And that was not a good thing.
Learning that so many of the cargo locks were not set was disturbing. A cargo shift can be very dangerous.
A plane's cargo must be carefully positioned to keep its front and rear balanced. The balancing point is called the center of gravity.
The center of gravity of an airplane is a theoretical point at which the airplane balances. If you could hold up the airplane by your finger, it would be the one place that it would be totally balanced.
If the center of gravity shifts mid-flight, then the plane becomes unstable and might be impossible to fly.
It's very important that the center of gravity stays within its specified range. If you have too many pallets shifting in the rear of the airplane, it's going to be too tail heavy. If they're in the forward part of the airplane, it'll be too nose heavy.
Rotate. Investigators know that if the cargo on Flight 101 shifted during takeoff, the change in the plane's center of gravity could be catastrophic.
Easy, easy.
The airplane may pitch up very rapidly, and they would have to react very quickly so that it doesn't pitch up into a stall condition.
And that's exactly what witnesses reported seeing. Investigators are now confident that shifting cargo caused the crash. They announced their progress just 4 days after the accident.
We were still doing press conferences, and we came really close to indicating that this was probably the cause of the accident. And that scared the heck out of me when we eventually learned that it did not.
No!
Investigators have found damning evidence from the crash. Dozens of unlocked cargo pallet locks. Were they unlocked before the plane hit the ground?
We set out to understand whether that was an artifact of the crash dynamics or whether they truly weren't engaged with the pallets to secure them as that airplane pushed back for takeoff.
A metallurgical inspection of the locks reveals that they were strong enough to endure the impact. The crash did not cause them to open. Now, investigators need to find out if the locks were left open, causing the cargo to shift in flight.
Led us to start talking to the folks that actually loaded the cargo.
Benson discovers that Fine Air had a partnership with a Dominican freight company, Aeromar. They assembled the pallets in a Miami warehouse before loading them onto the plane. Benson and Byrne visit the Aeromar warehouse.
We appreciate you taking the time to see us.
There's no doubt most of them were left unlocked.
Investigators expect the supervisor to admit fault, but it's almost the opposite.
We only logged the first and last pallets.
The supervisor shows investigators another DC-8, which is also being loaded with 18 pallets. Each pallet is wheeled into place along a rail built into the floor. All the spaces in the hold get filled with either empty or loaded pallets. If the pallets at the front and the back of the plane are locked in, the cargo can't shift.
You got 18 positions. You've got, inches between these pallets. Where's it going to shift to? In the forward of the airplane, it was a reinforced bulkhead where there was nowhere forward for it to go.
Records show that all 18 positions were filled with either full or empty pallets.
I can't see how it would have shifted. Thanks.
Benson is stumped. The tidy theory of cargo shifting is shot down.
We knew that there wasn't enough space for the cargo to have shifted.
If it wasn't a human error in the cargo hold, investigators now wonder about pilot error in the cockpit. But one key piece of evidence, the cockpit voice recorder, still isn't ready for investigators. So they start with the crew's track record.
To learn about the pilot's background and experience, we looked at FAA records of their career, their pilot history.
Captain Thompson had previously concealed 2 drunk driving convictions and had been suspended for 30 days from active flying.
Looks like we're good to go.
The first time flight engineer Millington took his certification exam, he failed it.
That raises some flags.
Max power.
And First Officer Petrosky had only 614 hours as a pilot for fine air.
The flight crew's training records indicated some anomalies and some shortcomings. That was always a factor in thinking about what happened.
With so many questions about the crew's experience, investigators are relieved that the cockpit voice recorder is ready for review. They hope it will shed light on the crew's actions.
Let's get started.
What they hear is surprising.
Ignition switches, they're off.
Air brake handle and pressure.
Standby and checked.
Standby horizon.
Checked on.
They sound like pros.
Investigators are impressed.
They appear to be communicating, coordinating effectively, and exchanging information.
80.
But things change quickly.
V1. Rotate.
Easy, 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 easy.
We'd heard easy, 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 and at that point, the crew became immediately aware that something was wrong, and they were doing their best to handle the airplane.
What's going on?
Whoa, whoa.
A cockpit voice recorder not only records voices in the cockpit, but it also records other noises. In this particular case, we heard the trim and motion warning horn go off.
He's trimming on the fly.
Investigators hear an alarm indicating that one of the pilots is making adjustments to the plane's trim settings. Pilots use their trim setting to adjust a tab on the plane's elevator, which controls the pitch angle of the plane on takeoff. Normally, pilots pre-select a trim setting before their takeoff, not during it.
They've been in the air for 11 seconds.
Only 11 seconds into the flight, investigators can hear the pilot make a critical adjustment to the plane's trim setting.
The trim and motion horn began almost immediately, and it indicated to us that the pilots were trying to trim the aircraft in some manner. We would assume it would be nose down.
Something's...
What's happening?
Too low, terrain.
No!
Pull up. Pull up.
Now, Benson wonders why the trim was adjusted on the fly.
What if the pilot forgot to preset the trim setting? Or set the wrong one?
The correct trim setting should have been calculated by the crew before takeoff, based on the plane's weight and center of gravity.
The trim was supposed to be set at 2.4.
Can you take us back to 1234, please?
Now they listen to see if the crew knew the correct trim setting for their plane's cargo configuration. 2.4 units nose up. Flight 101 is 90 seconds from takeoff.
Fine Air 101, you ready to go?
I need 30 seconds.
About 30 seconds.
Stabilizer and trim tabs.
.4 indicated.
Set for departure.
The recording tells investigators that the crew knew and set the correct trim settings for the DC-8.
So why the extreme pitch up?
A Miami police lab further exonerates the crew from causing the dramatic pitch-up by completing their analysis of the paint samples from the tail bumper and the runway.
In the end, we could not make them match up, so we determined that, in all probability, this aircraft's tail did not strike the ground during the accident sequence.
Okay. So the pilots didn't cause the pitch up.
It's now clear that the pilots themselves were not responsible for the steep takeoff. For investigators, the mystery of Flight 101 has only deepened. The NTSB has hit an impasse in their investigation into the Fine Air crash. So far, they have found no evidence of cargo shifting or pilot error.
I'm anxious to hear what happened.
But then the investigation gets a break. A Fine Air captain asks to be interviewed.
A Fine Air pilot let us know that he'd experienced an uncommanded pitch-up event during takeoff out of Miami about a month earlier.
He says his plane suddenly pitched up during takeoff without any inputs from the pilot.
The indications were that perhaps there was a weight problem there that had affected the airplane's performance during takeoff.
Other former Fine Air pilots also make anonymous complaints to the media about the same weight issue. They say the company routinely placed overly heavy loads on its cargo planes.
I personally have brought it up at several operational meetings that we were playing with Russian roulette. One of us is going to get stuck with a bullet in the chamber.
Investigators now have a new theory.
We were focusing on how much weight was on the airplane as it might have affected the pitch control of this aircraft.
Cargo weighed in at 87,923 pounds.
Benson and his team check the manufacturer's specifications to learn the maximum weight the plane could carry.
The plane was 32,000 pounds underweight.
It's another dead end. The plane wasn't overweight. Desperate now, investigators demand to see all the paperwork related to Flight 101 from both Fine Air and its cargo loading partner Aeromar. The first thing they notice is a small handwritten change on the paperwork.
It's definitely been changed.
It's the registration number for the plane used for Flight 101, and it's been altered.
There had been a change in aircraft. The paperwork set up for one aircraft, and all of a sudden, for maintenance reasons, it was changed to another aircraft.
The new airplane that was sent to the Aeromar warehouse for loading couldn't carry as much weight as the original plane.
Even among the same model of airplane, there can be small differences in weights based on the configuration.
Investigators now wonder if the last-minute change in aircraft resulted in it being overloaded.
Let's interview the loaders again.
They start by re-interviewing the two loading supervisors responsible for Flight 101.
We just want to clear up a few things.
One working for Fine Air, the other for Aeromar.
It became apparent that there was perhaps a little bit of obfuscation, a little bit of covering up going on, people not quite telling us the truth.
And did you revise the cargo weight for the new plane?
You bet.
The Fine Air supervisor claims the night dispatcher acted appropriately. It was the middle of the night when the dispatcher learned about the change in planes.
The dispatcher who was putting together the paperwork for this flight showed that the new airplane needed to have a lighter load by 1,000 pounds and needed to have that load moved into different positions to assure that its weight and the airplane could be handled correctly.
The Fine Air night dispatcher calculated the revised weights and left an instruction for Aeromar loaders to remove 1,000 pounds of cargo.
Fine Air calculated that 1,000 pounds needed to be removed from this load for the accident airplane to be within its weight and balance.
But the instruction never made it to the loaders.
Did your guys actually make that change?
No, we were never told to.
When the Aeromar operations manager came in that morning around 10 o'clock, They forgot to instruct that the 1,000 pounds needed to be removed from the pallet.
Do you think an extra 1,000 pounds would cost this?
The 1,000 pounds in itself is not necessarily significant, but every little bit adds up. Precision is important when it comes to loading an airplane.
Investigators still can't prove the plane was dramatically overweight. Then the investigation catches another break.
Benson.
An informant calls with a guilty conscience.
Who is this? Okay, I'm listening.
He won't reveal his identity, but he does reveal there's extra weight on the plane that investigators are missing.
Their figures don't include the pallet or the netting.
Told us, hey, here's where you're screwing up. Here's what you need to use as weights that are going onto the airplane. And that was a bit of a revelation for us. We needed that.
Investigators now calculate the weight of the cargo, including pallets and netting.
Our new calculation showed that instead of approximately 89,000 pounds of freight on the main deck of that aircraft, there were upwards of 94,000 pounds.
It's more than 5,000 pounds of extra weight.
Now we're getting somewhere.
The added weight could have had an effect on the plane's balance.
A lot of little things built up to have us believe that Fine Airlines wasn't living up to its name.
Investigators now hope they've solved Miami's worst plane crash in decades. Investigators believe Fine Air Flight 101 crashed because it was overweight. They want to test their new theory in a flight simulator.
Okay, we're good to go.
5,000 extra pounds have been added to reflect the true weight and balance of Flight 101.
The NTSB determined that the actual weight of cargo could have been over 5,000 pounds more than the pilots expected.
To the amazement of all, the plane lifts off without a glitch. It rises in a stable climb.
Damn.
The pilots themselves were able to fly out of the situation. And we scratched our heads a bit.
What am I missing?
Benson's team needs to dig deeper if they hope to understand why the flight went so horribly wrong. In the meantime, under pressure from the FAA, Fine Air volunteers to suspend all their flights until further notice.
For some time, they've been operating very loosey-goosey, throwing the stuff on the plane, not positioning it exactly like the manufacturer's manual said it had to be positioned.
Pressure to solve the accident increases. Fine Air wants to return to business as usual. Desperate to find a new clue, Benson's team reviews all their evidence.
We did obtain security video of the loading process, and it kind of gave us an overview. Things were going along normally for an hour or so, loading the airplane. And all of a sudden, things stopped. We saw pallets come off instead of go on. And that's kind of inefficient, you know, that's not the way it should work.
Take a look.
The Aeromar supervisor and Fine Air supervisor are in a heated discussion.
That they faced a challenge or a problem late in the loading process.
Any idea what's going on? Me neither.
Something was amiss. We didn't know what, but something was going on.
Investigators pay another visit to the airline.
Why did you remove those pallets at the last minute?
We weren't getting a straight story from the two folks that should have known, the Aeromar supervisor and the Fine Air supervisor.
The pallets didn't fit.
Investigators now learn that 2 of the pallets couldn't fit in their assigned space because their pre-wrapped cargo spilt over the side.
They don't fit.
The Fine Air supervisor is asked how to fix the problem. And according to his colleague, he provides the loaders with a solution.
Get these ones out so you can push those ones back.
Loading stopped for about 50 minutes while the pallets were removed.
That one goes right here.
To deal with the issue, they decide to move several loaded pallets back into spaces designated for empty pallets.
To solve that problem, they then pushed the cargo back.
So all the pallets were just moved back?
Yes, sir.
And we were unable to determine exactly who made the decision to correct the problem that they had with overlapping cargo. The Fine Air personnel stated that it was the Aeromar personnel who made that decision. However, the Aeromar personnel stated that it was the Fine Air cargo loading supervisor who made the decision.
What troubles investigators is that no one thought to tell the flight crew.
Looks like we're good to go.
You can move cargo around as much as you want, but the flight crew needs to know what the final configuration is.
If not, the consequences are dire.
It came out that the loaders on the plane weren't trained, didn't know what to do, didn't understand the very, very important concept of weight and balance. They thought all they had to do was get the stuff on the plane, throw it on there, and off it goes.
They just weren't thinking.
Now investigators must prove whether a careless act in loading cargo ended up killing 5 people. Based on the newly discovered pallet positions on Flight 101, investigators review the plane's actual weight distribution.
13 moves to 14. That's an extra 5,854 pounds to the back.
This shift of heavy pallets to the rear became a rather big deal because it ended up putting the center of gravity very, very far to the rear, probably past the safe point.
To prove their theory that the shift of more than 5,000 pounds to the rear of the plane played a role in the crash, investigators return to the flight simulator.
Okay, good to go.
Finally, the conditions for Flight 101 at takeoff are recreated as accurately as possible.
In the end, we were able to determine that the actual center of gravity for the accident airplane was just beyond its safe limit.
Too low, terrain.
That's what allowed the airplane to pitch up so aggressively just after takeoff.
It's all over in less than a minute.
They didn't stand a chance.
We think that the pilots did the best job they could under the circumstances.
Investigators now believe a cascading series of events caused the crash of Flight 101. Finair and Aeromar employees misstated the cargo's actual weight by more than 5,000 pounds.
This one goes right here.
Then, just before takeoff, a decision is made to redistribute the cargo, placing heavier pallets in the rear without informing the crew.
Looks like we're good to go.
When the flight engineer signs the load sheet, he doesn't realize the figures he's based his trim setting on are inaccurate.
2.4 indicated.
And now, just before takeoff, the pilots set their trim at the wrong setting.
Set for departure.
If the pilots don't know it, the trim has been set wrong.
Rotate.
When they do take off,
Hey, easy.
it's the hazardous situation.
What's going on?
Up. Terrain. Oh, up. Too low. Terrain.
In its report, the NTSB recommends that all airlines train their pilots to recognize the signs of a mistrimmed airplane and provide pilots with simulator training on techniques to recover. To be reinstated as an airline, Finair is ordered to overhaul their supervision of the cargo loading process, from improved weight scales to better training for loading staff.
Most of these individuals did not have the training or awareness of the differences in loading the main deck of an airplane compared to working in a warehouse or a lumberyard.
The FAA is criticized for doing a poor job overseeing and inspecting the cargo industry in South Florida.
They viewed their job as being in the business of business, and they wanted to help the airlines do as much business as possible. South Florida had the reputation of being an anything-goes kind of aviation place.
Finair and Aeromar also plead guilty to 5 counts of obstruction of justice and making false statements during the investigation. In September of 2000, Finair files for bankruptcy.
Well, sadly, it's not surprising to see some operations where things were not done as well as the industry standard. Certainly right now, where we are, those type things would never be allowed to happen.